Jilinda, you just got the quickest promotion and demotion I think I've ever seen before. Yeah. Yeah, look, thanks for joining. I'm a little bit nervous, I have to admit, and be open with you. And I've heard if you say that up front, it sort of clears the air a bit, because this is a pretty big group. It's not going to be a sunny, shiny message all the way through about grants. I'm going to be fairly direct and honest with you about grants. So if someone's been blowing wind towards you and hot air around grants and the possibility of grants, hopefully I can sort of at least give you some clarity about what it's all about. You know who I am. I'm from the Business Centre. We are going to go around the room. If you don't want to say who you are and where you're from, you can go pass and we will move on quickly. So just if you can give us your name, your organisation or business, where you're from, that would be great. And we'll start clockwise. Sorry, you're first. Go.
I'm John Vickers.
Yeah, okay, so a really big range of businesses, and that actually helps me to get an understanding of who's in the room. And so I can talk to that. So you've got a mix of small businesses, medium businesses, and a whole lot of what we call not-for-profits, orgs, community groups, that type of thing, okay? So I'll make sure I try and steer the conversation both ways, if you know what I mean. Okay, so you know who we are. That's just our title slide. I just want to throw in my own acknowledgement here, if okay. And I normally start with Allah, that's the Awabakal version of hi. I'm from Awabakal land. Our office is based in Mullumbimba, which is the place name in Awabakal where our physical office is. And I've travelled up through Wonnarua land, so I just wanted to make sure there's that kind of acknowledgement from me also. This is the title of my show, rather clunky, but this is what I'm hoping to provide for you. Navigating your business through grants landscape, hopefully for the best chance of success. Okay, so that's what we're going to be looking at. Who we are, Business Centre, you might not realise, we are also a not-for-profit. So we're limited by guarantee and we are based down in Newcastle, but we have presence in Mid-Coast. We operate down in the Central Coast and right up to as far as the upper hundreds you can go to the border of Denman. We have a presence in Muswellbrook. That's Lisa. She comes down to Singleton once, Jilinda? Every second week, so once a fortnight. And we also have a presence on the Mid-Coast, and the rest of us just buzz around the rest of the areas as well. We're a community-based group. It might seem funny that a not-for-profit works in the business space, but it was started by business people in Newcastle because they didn't think the government was doing enough for small business, small to medium-sized business. So that's 36 years ago. So that's how long we've been going. We are not-for-profit, which I've mentioned. As I said, very much business focused. We are all the people in the Business Centre, so all the advisors have been in business themselves. So they've run their own business. I've run my own business. I've been in the private sector, worked for federal government and state government and even council at one stage. So I've seen it all. I've seen grants on the inside, in the government side, determining grants and grant submissions, and on the outside, working as private sector, trying to get grants for businesses that were my clients as well. So I've got a pretty good understanding of how it works both ways. This is how we sort of work. You've seen our areas. We still hold a very good satisfaction rate, which we're very proud of at 99%. When that drops down to 98, we get very, very, very upset. And we always try and get back to 99 again. It's always one person, you know, there's always one person. I did some sums of my own. In over 3 years in the Business Centre, I did 1,600 interactions with business. And that's a mix of phone calls, online, being in the business. And there's a couple of double ups in there. So that's what our role is like. We might be meeting 3 to 4, maybe even 5 businesses a day. We best work with one-on-one advisory. As you know, as we went around the room, everyone is different. Besides people who are from the same business, everyone's different. So we seem to think this as definitely the value being in a case-by-case situation with each business. That's why if you ever, has anyone ever looked up any information from a government page? Now it's tabs and links backwards and forwards and and you know, there's just so much information that the government throws at you. That's because they have to provide information for every single scenario and every single business individual and levels of understanding and skills. That's why there's so much. That's why there's so much value in doing this one-on-one. Okay, We also run projects and workshops like this. And on that note, you know, I'd like to thank Jelinda for inviting us up here. She made the connection to us. She put some faith in me, which also makes me nervous. But let's see what we can do. I don't know if you mind me mentioning this, Jelinda, but she was also one of us at one stage. So she was a business advisor like us at the business centre there. We had you at one stage. We're going to get you back, I think. Yeah. This is what we're going to be going through today. So this is a small agenda. And we've got the grants landscape, simple steps to success, some of the resources you might need when applying, a very small case study. Now, as you can see, I've actually got down here the Singleton Council grant, which is the community grant. We're going to do that at the end. So I'm actually going to run through my normal presentation. That's probably going to go for about an hour and a half. And then at the next half an hour, after that, we're going to be doing specifically on that Singleton grant, if anyone wants to hang around. Quick show of hands in the room. Who's looking specifically at this? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6-ish. Okay, that's good. That'll be a good number. And you're all welcome to stay for that too, by the way. And I've got a whole bunch of takeaways and links, which I can probably forward to Jelinda if she wants to let them know, send them out through the group as well. Okay, who's ever heard this? Who's ever heard? I heard there were grants. Yeah. Do you recall? Now we've met. How are you going? Yeah. So normally when people contact the business centre, this is a lot of what I hear. So they come and speak to me. They know I've dealt in grants before, and they said I heard there were grants. So my next question back to them is, who told you that? You know, what kind of grant was it? And they normally can't tell me. And also, who told you? And they normally can't tell me. So it's like it's been heard in some sort of urban myth type way, but they can't actually remember what it was or who told them. So next time someone says that to you, do me a favour and say, what type of grant was it? What was it called? Who was giving it out? So you hold them accountable for this bit, all right? So, and I hear it a lot. And that's because, now it's not just the government does this, I'm going to tell you other ways to find other buckets of money, but the government grants messages like this. It's really, really big. You find all those lists. And then as you sort of go down through the eligibility requirements, it starts getting smaller and smaller and smaller until it ends up like this. You know, so they get you in with a big message, and they have to do that to show all the people that, you know, all the taxpayers that they're providing grants for X, Y, or Z. But as you go through, they get all these little parameters in, and it's really, really tiny, and you realise I'm not eligible for that after half an hour of reading. Okay, so that's why you sometimes hear, I heard there were grants. Okay, so this is important, particularly around that storm grant. So I talked a bit about that. Now there are merit-based grants, and even if the type of grants is a very generic term on its own, because there's also incentives, there are rebates, there are paybacks, there are reimbursements, and so now it's all sort of generically known as grants. Two normal types. So the merit-based ones, if you hear of that, the merit-based ones are normally involved a single bucket of money, and there might be rounds involved, and they're normally based around a set of merit criteria. And they're very competitive. Depending on the sector, they're always going to be competitive, okay? The eligibility-based ones are more like those storm grants where you tick a couple of boxes within the eligibility. You would have seen them around either COVID, small business grants around COVID, around storms, some around bushfire, some around when we had a rat plague. You know, there were all these types of eligibility-based grants, okay? So that's the two main types of grants that you will get in grants in generic terms. So what are grants? How do they come about? Grants, from the government perspective, is normally policy being delivered on the ground. So it will normally go through, it will be sort of either a budget allotment to a department, filtered through to a sub-department, to a service, and it might end up becoming either a bucket of money for a grant, a bucket of money for staff or staffing, or a bucket of money for potentially bricks and mortar or some sort of service. Okay, so there's variation as it flows down through from that allotment, how it's delivered on the ground. So it's normally policy being delivered on the ground from the government perspective. So here's the big one, and this is one I get asked a lot, the difference between commercial for-profit grants and not-for-profit and community grants. Okay, so, and is anyone consider themselves in a social enterprise? Does anyone know what a social enterprise is? It's okay, you can be wrong. It's all right. Yeah, okay, great, thank you. All right, so before I get to what a social enterprise is, let's talk about the different sets. Now, the government considers you either to be a not-for-profit, a for-profit, commercial, private, or not-for-profit. Okay, they're the two main buckets, okay? So the places where you look for the commercial and for business grants and the not-for-profit grants are normally mostly different. Okay, so the places you will look for them, and I've got some tips for you later on and some links. The questions you have to ask yourself here is, are you going for it just because it came up? So if it's commercial grants, are you just applying for it because it's there? Do you have something in mind for that particular grant from the commercial side? And it's normally the commercial sides that are the merit-based grants, and they're quite tough. Also, I just lost my train of thought. There's no caboose to my train of thought. Okay, we'll move on to the not-for-profit one. Now, the not-for-profit one, in my experience, is pretty hotly contested too. There'll still be merit-based ones here. And I've noticed over the years that the buckets are getting smaller and there's more organisations applying for them. So that's the hard part. You have to just make sure you get your head around, okay? The government wants bang for buck whenever they're delivering any money, either it be here or here. So they want some value for money out of the grant, and they'll make you show that in the application normally. Never leave any of the attachments missing. In a room where lots of grants come into a room from the government side, and I've been in one of those rooms, they'll have a whole bunch of bodies around the table, and they'll get the grants in hard copy and they'll put them in piles in front of each of the offices. And the aim of that first cull is to get rid of any non-eligibility straight away. So there'll be an immediate cull. If you're missing an attachment, if you're missing some information on the org or the business, it will be wiped out straight away. And then the rest who have done that part okay, go to the next round. That's how that part works. If you ever wondered that you'd hear crickets next time you put your grant application in, that's sometimes what happens. When you get some of these questions too, you get a bit of information on how they're weighted. Now, what that means is each question or each merit criteria might get a score attached to it. One question might have 20, one question might have 30, and one question might have 10 and 10 and so on. It's that 31 that's got a lot of weight to it. That's what you've really got to nail. So where there's weighting shown on those questions, you've got to make sure that's what you concentrate on in there as well. I might get to budgets a bit later on because people struggle with budgets in applications. That's just what happens. There are exceptions to that. Okay, so in the arts space, you can, where the artist is actually sometimes also the entity. There are anything in Create New South Wales or cultural arts are normally open to both not-for-profit and artists as sole traders, okay? NDIS is a good example of indirect funding because that goes to the participants first and then all the service providers try and vie for that money on the outside. And community development funds is another one, and that is the Singleton one which we're going to be looking at today. A question I get asked a lot, if a for-profit business sees a community grant and it's not eligible, what do I do? So they see a community grant and goes, oh, that's something that would be really great. I've got a program to deliver that. They can't do it because they're not a not-for-profit. Now, has anyone heard of auspicing funds? Yep. You don't nod, Jalinda. You know what this is. This is where, so the for-profit, so it's a sole trader, goes to a community group in their lane and get them to auspice the funds. So the org holds the funds and the artist or the person with the program delivers the program and is paid through that auspice. So that's how that works. It can get clunky and you do have to find that right organisation to help you do that, but it is possible. The government doesn't understand what social enterprise is. Right? They either want you to be for-profit or not-for-profit. They don't get the whole social enterprise thing. Social enterprise is normally a for-profit business that has a higher sort of purpose. And it might be social, it might be environmental, it might be something like that, okay? And that's what it might do. It might donate some of its profits to a local org, or it might work itself and give in-kind support to certain organisations. So you might have heard of places, ones like Who Gives a Crap Toilet Paper is a good example of a social enterprise. even though their toilet paper comes from China, which we won't talk about. Okay. Okay, this is what's happened in the last 2 years. Everyone remembers the Albanese government came in last year. It seems much longer than that, but they have come in, and they came in May. So they've been in power for over a year. When that happened, it was a big change. New ministers, new portfolios, new departments, everything changed, and handed down its first budget last March. Okay, so all that's very slow. That means all that budget money is still being sort of whittled out and takes a while to filter down through departments and into the service people and onto the ground. It takes a while. But it does change programs. It changes in funding, and it changes the way services are provided, and it changes grants. Just before a government, or just before there's a vote, okay, so just before you head off to the polling booth, all of the public service, if it be federal or public, will go into something called caretaker mode. And it does my head in to think about all those bodies they can't do anything. They're not allowed to do anything. They can't engage in contracts. They can't give out work. They can't do anything. They can't give advice. They are basically frozen because they are not allowed to commit the incoming government to anything. So that's why they all go into caretaker. It's the biggest waste of resources I could think of, but that's what happens. I've been in there, sort of at my desk twiddling my thumbs during caretaker. And there was one time when they couldn't decide who the Prime Minister was going to be, so that took a while. Same things just happened in state government. Okay, so we've got a fairly new state government coming in. They came in March. Okay, and they've been in the wilderness for about 12 years, I think. 12 years sounds about right. 12. So they've been in the wilderness for 12 years. So some of them are very, very green, and they're being very, very careful, is what I see on the ground. Lots of new ministers, and they can't find the staff to fill in and back them up as well. We're lucky here. We've actually got some pretty good ministers who have got skin in the game and have been around for a while, like Yasmin Cately, Jodie Harrison, I think. Who else have we got? We're pretty good here. We're going pretty well. So we're lucky. Now, the state government just handed over its budget last month. All right, I think it was first or second Tuesday in the month, and same thing happened. Changes to program and changes to funding on the ground, all that kind of thing. Now that's going to take a little bit longer. So just because the budget was last month, the budget's going to take a while to actually make an impact on the ground, and there'll be some changes along the way too. So that's what happens. If you're looking at organisational funding, so if you're an org or not-for-profit, this also impacts on you, by the way, as well. Okay, so just on the side, don't forget to check out your local government and what they're doing, and hence that's why we are going to be looking at the community grant at the end of the session, and we'll get to that. Here's my 5 simple steps to success, and to add to that, I've just realised I went into the loo before the talk and I had a mic on, so I hope that wasn't turned on. So it's a bit of a rookie error. Okay, great, thank you. Yeah. So I've got these 5 simple steps to success, but I'm going to add some takeaways at the very end too, little short grabs of what I think is the best thing that you should keep in mind. Read the criteria. So, and then sort of read it again. And if you can get someone else in your org or your business, get them to read it too. There's nothing worse than sort of realising you're getting into an application and you weren't even eligible in the first place. So make sure you read the criteria. Okay. So yeah, read the guidelines. So that's going to be in the guidelines somewhere. Don't forget about the guidelines, because it's always a really good idea to talk to whoever's administering the grant. There's normally a phone number or an email address that you can contact, and do that. Sometimes there's a bit of a window on that. Sometimes they'll pull that service 2 weeks before the deadline, but always do that. The first thing they will ask you is, have you read the guidelines? So read the guidelines first before you do that part. And it also gets you on their radar as well. Make sure you qualify for it. Is it really for me? So the idea is that you actually don't try and shoehorn your project into a grant when it's going to be really, really hard, because you'll just do your head in and burn energy for nothing. Yep. Answer the question. If you want to go back to your deep, dark mind of when you're at high school, your English teacher would have said this to you, okay? Just answer the question. Don't wander off and meander off into some other thing because it's in your head. Stick to the question and keep it simple. Know what your goals. Now, I can talk to lots of businesses and not-for-profits about what their goals are. and sometimes they can't tell me. So this isn't a bad exercise to do anyway. It's a big one for not-for-profits because their goals are basically why the reason they've actually got together and bothered to actually become an incorporated association or be a charity. So there is a core root to why they exist. So we need to know what if those goals are going to line up with the funding. Now, the resources and supporting evidence are really, really crucial to this in some grants, okay? Some will ask you to refer to a business plan. Not always, but some will ask you for a business plan if you have one. And I've got a bit of a shortcut for that. Some will include budgets. So budgets, CapEx is sort of capital expenditure if you have it going forward. Timelines, forecasts and projected earnings is some of the stuff you'll have to get your head around. If you've got someone in your business who's a bookkeeper or someone that is at least financially minded, that could be good. I know the orgs have to look after their treasurers so they don't run away. So make sure that your treasurer can help you with this. So be careful. You've got to demonstrate the capacity to deliver the project, and they'll always ask you that. And I believe there's a spot in that in the Singleton grant that actually shows that you can demonstrate you can actually deliver it. And you've got to prove it. You've got to prove you can deliver it. Actually, policies are pretty important too. They'll want to know, they'll want to see sometimes, depending on the grant and where it's pointed or focused, they'll want to see what policies you've got in place as well. You've got to demonstrate the demand and potential economic benefits of your project to the community. That's also going to be one that's going to be big in the Singleton grant as well. This requires research, and these are some places to go. Now, the two big players in the stats and information space are RemPlan and ID Economy. Your council is signed up to RemPlan, so there's really good information existing on the council site with all these fantastic, it's an amazing map on there, which I didn't realise how many suburbs are in Singleton, but it gives you, it's a free kick to get stats. Okay, so I built this, and it won't make any sense to you because you won't be able to read that, okay? But it's something I'm thinking of making available to each of you. It's basically a grant application canvas. So it's basically a roadmap to applying, and it runs across like this. So this is your path over here, and this is the government part over here, and this is the interaction part between you and the funding body, okay? So I just wanted to show that to you, that I am getting my head around trying to provide a process that's fairly simple for business. So for those who want that, I can make that available to you if you just want to check it out. Doesn't count as a business plan, just want to mention. But they are sometimes required. And even if you've got something loose, has anyone got like one of those really big, like 20, 30 page ring folders with business plan in it? Good, don't bother, okay. Unless you're going for a commercial grant, then you might need that one. So we need to have a business plan and sort of like a forward-thinking strategy to show the government or the funding body that you're not a fly-by-nighter. Okay, so we're going to have a quick look at what the business model canvas looks like, and I think there's another session coming up, Jel, on 9th on business planning. So you'll be having probably a closer look to this, unless Lisa's probably going to take you through a marketing canvas. Okay. So this is what we use a lot at the Business Centre. It's a plan to a page for your business. If you don't have a business plan, I would start here. If someone says, "Hey, I'd like it in Word format," you take each of the headings and you put them in a Word format. Okay, so this is more like a sandpit for you, and you basically throw everything up. Now, how we start this is I've got some silly colleagues who start over here, some start here, some start here. I start here and then go to here. These are your customer segments that you can identify. This is your value proposition, which is a nice bit of business speak. For me, value proposition is why are you different? What is your secret sauce? Why are you better than the other business that's like you? So it's that type of value proposition. And the key partners are your ecosystem. Anyone that helps you do what you need to do is in your ecosystem, okay? And there's activities, resources, relationships, and channels. And my least favourite part, but very, very crucial, is the money in and out. Okay, so I won't spend too much time on that because you're going to cover that with another group. Just wanted to demonstrate that that is a quick hack to get a quick business plan. I wanted to show this because this is what some people are faced with when they're looking at a budget. Now, this is a sales mix budget. So budgets are just part of applying for grants. And there is a light budget within the Singleton grant, but you still have to tackle it somehow. And there's another table under that that tackles capabilities. So whether you like budgets or not, it just becomes a part of the grant. And you've got to show that you'll be able to break down the costs that you're asking for as well. I often see grants that come up for $2 million, and just by default, the business will apply and ask for $2 million. I said, okay, what's the budget look like? And then they go, oh, well, we just thought we'd ask for $2 million. No, you've got to break it down and actually show how much you're going to need. All right, and you can put some contingency in there as well. Okay, now the capacity to deliver the project is actually really, really important. And it's big in the federal side and actually trying to get grants as well. So organisational structure, the roles and responsibility, they'll want to know as well, is everyone in your staff have the right qualifications or legal documents to operate? So if they got working with kids checks or police checks, or if they got green cards, or if they got construction site cards, or they want to know that that's all in place as well. Just consider governments and councils to be very risk averse. So this is all just covering off and making sure that that is covered. There's nothing wrong with being risk averse, Joe, that's okay. Letters of support are really good. So any endorsements you can get from whoever you can get them from is really good. So think about gathering. I just wonder if you've got a local member, how many people are going to ask them for endorsement for the next grant round in Singleton. But it doesn't always have to be your local member. It could be someone, you know, of note in the area. It can be from outside the area. You can prove that you can deliver something. It's basically showing support. Just be honest. You know, don't make stuff up and don't talk it up outside what you actually can do. I don't like the idea of, you know, a really small business of 3 people say they can deliver what a team of 10 can. So just keep it real for that part. Organisational structures are often missing. It's a really basic thing. This is just an example of what you might look like, and obviously there's not many people in the room would have that kind of team, but it just can be exactly what you've got on paper. You can include people who actually do services for you in part of this organisational structure if they work with you a lot, and it might be something. Do you mind if I use you guys as an example? It might be with Ungaroo, so the Aboriginal Court, just across the road, over there. Which way am I facing? Over there. Over there. Thank goodness I'm not driving. So, so we've got Be Human HR, actually does some of that HR work for them, but they could include that in their organisational structure. Right, so that's just an example. Okay, so the demonstration of the benefits is all words, and I may as well, there's a bit of an elephant in the room here at the moment with words and narrative on answering questions. Does anyone want to have a wild guess what the elephant in the room might be? AI? Yeah, what were you going to say? Yes, yeah, that is a good answer. Yeah, but I'm thinking more about the hot topic at the moment is ChatGPT. And I ran a similar session in Maitland, and that was sort of one of the first questions. Can we get ChatGPT to write words for us? Yes, you can. Now, even I've used ChatGPT because you might sit in front of a question or a proposition and the words just aren't there and you are stuck. So what I've done in the past is I've given the brief to ChatGPT, 200 words please on circular economy meets advanced manufacturing, something like that. And then boom, there's 200 words. Then you go back through and you re-engineer it. Okay, you're just using that as a bit of a starting point and you can build that back. ChatGPT isn't to be trusted for all the facts just yet, at least. Now, someone who's well known in tech world down in Newcastle said that they will look for any open source information on the web first, and obviously Wikipedia is one of those. And we all know Wikipedia isn't always correct. So that's where it's sourcing some of its information for before it goes deeper, okay? But sure, if you want to use it as a tool to get you started, absolutely fine. So you do need to demonstrate the existing demand and particularly the economic benefits, because that's actually one of the pillars of the one we'll be looking at. I like to talk about edge effects. So if you talk about, I spoke to a psychologist 2 days ago who was talking about this a client that was just out of prison and was rehabilitated through seeing her really, really well and is now an active part of the community. We talked about the edge effects of that individual who's now in community, as opposed to breaking and entering and stealing, is now contributing to society, now has a child, now has positive effects on the people around them in the community and the family. So there's a knock-on effect to the things that you do in the community. So think about your project, and if you want to supercharge your case for what you are doing, think about the edge effects and the knock-on effects for what you're doing on the ground. It's really will get you that extra little level up from anyone else. Unless you're competing with other people in the room, then you have to take them out in the car park, as that's probably the only problem. You'll need to show the state of play in your own industry. So you've got to have knowledge of the sector that you are in. So don't be alone with all this stuff. Make sure that you're aware of what's going on the ground. Okay, so make sure that you can actually show that as backing up that your project will have impact there. We talked about the economic data that you might need as you use as a base. I don't want to push Google, but really searching can be done so easily these days to get any sort of data that you might think of as well. So use those RAM plans, use ID Economy, even ABS, so Bureau of Statistics stats are always good. Getting your head around what you can actually do on the ground through your project is essential. Right. There's normally some KPIs involved, so key performance indicators. So you have to understand the reason for having the grant in the first place. So why does the grant exist? So normally if you go back and you take a step back, it'll refer to either a plan or a strategy or some deliverable that the government has been given, right? So you've got to understand why that KPI exists and why is the grant actually there in the first place. There's lots of clues in the department name, and there'll be plans and lots of things that you can look at to back that up. And even though you might think you're answering the question, you actually have to labour the main benefit to support the grand vision. That would be good. Now, you get to give yourself a small high five if you get the grant. So you get to go, yeah, we got the grant, that's really great. What people forget about, and I'll have to make sure I warn you about this part, is the management side. Just getting the grant might be great and, fantastic, and you'll feel good and you'll celebrate, but it's not over. You've got to show, you've got to deliver that grant. There's normally reporting involved on what you have to do, and they might be based around milestones that you said you would complete. It'll be based over time, and that's what some of the grants might be based on, their own milestones, that they are paid out that way. So you've got to make sure that you realise that it's going to take up time, staff members' time, to actually do that, to commit hours to it. Because they want to know. They're going to want to know, and they want to show proof how that money was spent on the ground. If the grants are repeated, so if they're in rounds and you're allowed to apply for another round or another grant, if that department sees that you haven't delivered a grant that you've applied for before correctly, you won't be considered for the next grant. So make sure you get that part right. There are other conditions. Now this doesn't have anything to do with the why I'm here today, but I brought this across as an example, right? So I actually have been given, we have been given some regional New South Wales funding to actually deliver circular economy to advanced manufacturing, which is like trying to smash two eggs together. Now, part of the conditions of us getting that funding was carrying branding. So that's something that is a requirement. It's given to you if you get the grant. Now, also down the bottom, we've got Inguru, Hunter If, and Boomerang Labs. The collaboration was actually gave our application more weight. All right, so we demonstrate that on that banner, and I can tell you the collaborations are looked up, are very highly regarded. So if you can show that you can collaborate and give more bang on the ground with another org or another business, that really looks good, okay? So You don't get, there's no such really thing as a free lunch. You've got to actually show where that funding was from in most cases, particularly from state government and federal government. And there will be rules about where you put that, how big it is, the right colour to use, etc., etc., etc. So, and you get in trouble if you don't do it properly. So this is a case study that wasn't me, it was a colleague of mine down on the south coast. So small surf club, they needed a new surf boat. They couldn't find a grant and there wasn't enough local support to sponsor enough to get together to get a surf boat. So they looked through the grants and they came up with one that was based around leadership, and they wrote the grant and focused it towards using the surf boat as a tool to deliver learnings around leadership and teamwork. So the surf boat was actually sort of used, it was funded through the grant, and they used that surf boat as basically a vehicle, literally, to show leadership and how to demonstrate leadership in a team. So I just thought that was an interesting example. It's very close to what you'll be trying to do with a Singleton Community Fund grant. So things like that are important, that you can actually show and demonstrate that. I just thought that would be an interesting sort of angle to look at. Okay, and that's what this is. Now, I'm not going to do a deep dive into this yet, that comes at the end. But this is a grant, now you might be able to help me here, Jel. The Singleton Community Economic Development Fund. Now, this is supported by Bloomfield and Glencore. I think so, yeah, so two mines, Bloomfield Group and Glencore. It used to be that all the council, the LGA areas, were supported by their local mines with a fund. So there was Cessnock, Singleton, Upper Hunter, I can't remember if it's Singleton, Upper Hunter, Muswellbrook. Yeah. And now it looks as though the only LGA that I can see that's renegotiated this is Singleton. Okay, so we've got Bloomfield on board, a mine, and Glencore. So you've got one to your north and one to your south. Yeah. So I think Bloomfield's got Ricks Creek, and Glencore's big and to your north as you go through to Muswellbrook. Anyone know what that's called when mine gives council money to give to the community? Anyone know what that's called? Yes. 100%. 100%. Yeah, yeah. It's what the mines are looking for is something called social licence. Okay, so remember that word. You'll see it used by places like Orica, by the mines, by forestry potentially. And what that does is it gives them basically the feel goods to be allowed to operate in someone's community. And they do that by giving out money to the community. And it still happens in Muswellbrook above you, where the local mines might support the local soccer club and give the under-7s their shirts or something like that, sponsorship. So that still goes on. It's been formalised in this amount. And apart from the old community groups that was in past, the amount is quite generous. So it's really something you shouldn't turn your nose up at and have a look at. It used to be around 6,000, 5,000, now it's up to 10 and above. So it's got a bit more serious. Right, so these are my best dressed tips for grants. Has anyone ever applied for a grant in the room? Right, who were this? Now keep your hand up if you were successful. Oh, right, go. What was yours?
A COVID grant.
COVID grant?
Because when we were a small business, we were unable to get any funds for COVID.
Okay. Easy to apply for?
Yeah.
Yeah. Have you been asked about it by the government since? Right, so you were checked afterwards?
Yeah, they sent me a survey to fill out.
Great, okay, good.
Yeah, European.
Yep, 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 got you. No, good. Okay. Someone down the back has applied for it, yeah? And were you successful? Right, good. Did you get your driveway fixed? Not yet. Oh no, I know. Not because of the driveway, I hope. Not because of the driveway. Yeah. Okay, so we've got some experts in the room, so we might get you to take over. There was one down here. Yep.
Yeah, Veterans and Community Grant. We also had a grant for Navy cadets.
Yeah, but you've got a lot of cards on the table. I reckon you've got a good chance of winning a grant. Yeah.
It's the way you write
You should be up here, I think. Yeah. Did you have one too?
Yeah, aircon for the community hall.
Oh, perfect. Did you remember who that was through?
Community building partnership.
State, federal? Good. Now see how that sort of gets lost? You sort of like, was it state or was it federal? At the time, it's sort of more important, but when you're actually applying for it, you kind of go, who cares? Just give me the...
Yeah, well, I've been trying for quite a few years
Yeah.
on different projects and
Yep.
never successful, but this time I
Yep.
was successful.
Was it an old hall?
The hall was built in 39.
Yep, so definitely air conditioning would be handy.
Oh yes, I've been trying for many, many years to get it. So
Yeah.
I've got fully ducted aircon now.
Wow, well done. Okay, it's not in your house, is it? No, okay. It's in the community hall? Great, perfect. And
And it works
so,
well.
yep, so on that note, and I'll cover it later in one of the points, is that when you have a project that you can budget and cost, so you would have had to get a quote for the air conditioning, and you might have had to get maybe another couple just to make sure that you get the best one, and that would have had to be proven with quotes and receipts that it was actually installed and put in, not in your house, but actually in the hall.
Well, then the council took over the money.
Yep,
You know, we were able to, we won the grant,
yep.
but we got the money, but
Yep.
I had to give the money to council and the council then.
They managed it. So there's sort of an auspicing, but not quite. Yeah, okay.
They've managed it,
Yep.
been doing all the reporting and the
Yep.
appeal and all that sort of thing.
Yeah. Now, there was a time when councils did auspice, so they were a good free kick to go and get auspicing through, but I think most have pulled back on that now because it gets a bit risky. So you probably have to ask Jill if something, you're probably better off finding a good community group to do that through. She's shaking her head. This is really important, and that's why it's the first point, is please don't base your business or set your business up relying on grants. It's really, really important. If you're here because you think your business needs a grant, and there's something that you want to do with your business and you think it's worthwhile, sure, go ahead. But if you want to sort of set up or get started, and this is really big when you're starting out a business, there are no grants for startups. Please don't listen to any rhetoric or anyone out there who says there's startup grants for people. There's just not. There are R&D grants, which is a tax-based rebate, but you have to be doing R&D, which has legislation attached to it, and you have to be a company. There's not many people in the startup world who do that and then spend $20,000 on R&D. And that's where the eligibility funnel squeezes down on you in that case. So if you're setting up a business, you will have a war chest, like some capital to get going. The first level of that funding is going to be what they call the 3 Fs, family, friends and fools. Okay, so that's normally your first kickback. I know people might remortgage their house, for example. If the bank will let them, sometimes people don't tell them what the money is going to be spent on when they do that, when they take some equity out of their house. And then there's commercial loans, and because of the banking commission, banks are hanging on to money fairly tightly, so they don't let go of it easily. Then there's crowdfunding, and then there's things like angel investment, and where if you've seen Shark Tank, that's sort of a version of that, okay? So there's different ways to get money without grants, but don't rely on grants. It's just too unpredictable. It takes time and it burns petrol because it gets pretty stressful. You're nodding. Have you been through this? Have you?
Just there's so much back and forth with asking
Yeah.
letters of support and things.
Doing your head in?
No, it's good, but it's
Yeah.
confusing.
Yeah. And the funny thing is when you have that communication with someone on the other side, it's still a person, but if it's a particular type of person, they'll be really pernickety. So you've got to be careful. Every time I sometimes get a feeling that there's a culture of expectation from business that they deserve a grant. Okay, now when I was very green in the federal government, I had a fellow literally bang the table in front of me. He wanted to import 10,000 plastic whistles from China, and he believed he deserved a grant for that because he'd been a taxpayer all his life. So that's that culture of expectation I'm talking about. So try and pull that back a bit if you can. Be realistic. He's asking basically taxpayers to fund his business, is what he's doing there. This is really important. It's not about you. The grant isn't about you. Okay, the grant is about the person giving you the money and then what you can do with it for them. So if you think of it that way, it will help you write the grant. So It's not about you, it's actually about the funder who's actually giving you the money. You're their instrument, you're their tool. And they want to put something, they want to brand it and say, look what we supported, aren't we awesome? You've got to think of it that way, okay? Someone told me that if you're getting support for a business, try and imagine yourself shaking hands with the minister in front of it. And if it's a wastewater treatment plant, that's a really hard sell. You know, so try and make it sort of look good for the minister and for the department and whoever's giving you the grant. Read the guidelines, please. Now that's easy for me to say, but I've read through loads of them and they're so boring. Okay, but just cut straight through to the parts around eligibility and then to the merit-based stuff, and you'll be fine. Sometimes you'll have to link back to a report or a strategic plan. Do that, but just make sure that you read the guidelines. And if there's anything you're unsure about, that's when you make that contact back. That's where you sort of reach out for that contact in the grant as well. As I said, sometimes there's a window, and sometimes it'll finish like, as I said, 2 weeks before the deadline. If you're going to apply for it, do it properly. Can anyone guess what that last word is? Because I don't want to say it, gets to offend anybody. But don't half commit, I'll say. If you're going to do it properly. And it's best if you do it with someone else as a team, right? I don't write grants for people anymore. It's too risky and it's too much in it and there's no time anymore. What I do is if you want me to help, I will do that. I'll help you re-engineer your words. I'll help you make sure that you're covering the questions, and I'll make sure that you're eligible. That's the stuff I can do for you and help with. That's what my dad would have said. God bless him. So if you can co-write it, that's the best way to do it. If you have a committee or a board, don't just make one person do it. They will leave. Try and give them a partner to bounce off and do it with, so they don't get completely burnt out about it. If you're in a business, try and get someone within the business to help you. There are professional services out to write grants. There's a couple down in Newcastle. Please check the cost and the pricing on it. Some will charge by the word, some will charge by the hour. But they do exist. Or some will take a percentage of what you've won. Some of them are just pirates. Okay, so just watch out for that. See if they can show you any examples of grants that they've won in the past. All right, so that part's really important. Have they got any credibility or runs on the board if they do that? Also, if you're with the business and you're only small and it's only you or someone else, hand the application to someone that doesn't know what you do or doesn't know about the grant and see if they understand it. That's often a good way to sort of, as a final check to your words. Make sure that the budget is considered and not too generic or too general. And I know that the budget within the Singleton grant is fairly simple. The ones, you're normally sent a template, and some of them can be quite complicated, and some of them are locked. So the formulas will add up to X, Y, or Z. So it's fairly limiting, but you do have to give as much detail as you can. That's why it helps to have projects that are ready and scoped out and budgeted on the shelf that you can pull out and go, yeah, that's for that grant, because that means all that hard work is done. Remember that, don't forget, just getting the grant is the end of the line. You've also got to do the acquittal part as well, and you've got to do the reporting. Always, I think that for a business, applying for a grant is specifically a business decision. Okay, if you're taking one of you guys a day off, that's money you're not earning. It's money you're spending on this, so you just burnt time and money applying for a grant. So make sure you're aware of that when you actually start applying for the grant. Okay, here's all my links, which you won't be able to read, but I'll run through them. Now, Service New South Wales, I'm glad I gave you an ad. Whew, glad it was at the top too. They've now got inside Service New South Wales, and that's the full link, which I'll send to Jel, is a pretty good searchable list of grants, and you can search by state, you can search by industry, and search by area, open, closed, and it's filterable. So you can go through that and you can actually get results based on that. None of the filtered ones are perfect, but it's better than what they used to be. You'd have to go do the searches manually. So that's the New South Wales, Service New South Wales one. That's the federal one, there's two there, known as Grants Connect. So that will be the lead to it, and you end up with grants.gov.au at Grants Connect, which is also filterable. And I was going to show you my inbox, which shows you the alerts that you get from Grants Connect. So you can get it, and they come straight to your inbox, so you don't have to go searching. Please note .gov.au in addresses. They are government websites. And I'll show you an example of what to stay away from in a minute. If you're in the community space, you should definitely be looking at the Community Grants Hub. Anyone look at that website? Good. Now there's a couple of other paid ones as well. Smarty Grants, Grant Guru. If you are constantly looking at grants, it is a small fee, but I think you can get a community rate, I'm not sure. And it might be worth actually applying and actually just subscribing to one of those as well. And I think they have other resources that help you do grant writing and that kind of thing. This is just from the parliamentary page, the Australian Government, which has all the New South Wales, so searches by state, all the New South Wales grants are available at the moment, including things like club grants and things like that. Does anyone know what club grants are? Yep, do you know why?
No, because I won one anyway, but I can't remember.
That's okay. That wasn't meant to be a, that was more of a,
No,
yeah.
you used to be able to go to a club and they would donate money to you, but now they've got to go through this club, New
Yep.
South Wales.
Yep. I'll give you a clue. I'll give you a clue. This won't mean anything to anyone younger than 40.
Yeah, through the post.
Yeah, that's right. Because no one does that anymore. Unfortunately, I did when I was young. Okay, that part hurts. So good to be aware of that. So that's actually another part of social licence. Not that they've been asked to do it, they've been made to do it by the government to give back to the community. Because, as you know, gambling is responsible for a lot of chaos at times in the community. Right.
And also the clubs need to get rid of the funding too.
Yes, yeah.
They need to get rid of it. So
Yeah.
that's how
Yep. And I always do it locally. So if you do apply for a club grant, wherever you're based at, you've got to find the local club that's providing that grant, because it's got to go into that community. Someone asking a question?
I was just going to say, Dan Rapicoli has an email and sends out monthly grants in it.
Yes, I was going to mention that, and it's really good. A lot of the members will have either a newsletter where they provide that information, or just send them out as updates to your inbox, and that's a good one. So they don't just give out flags; they can actually be handy for actually getting that type of information. So thank you. Yeah, okay. Now, I've been finding a writing battle with these guys for about 10 years. Okay, they're called Grants Assist. They'll show up like this, Australian Grants. They used to be called Australian Government Grants.org. All right, so they're not a government organisation. And they also used to have a little Australian flag in their corner, which they got into big trouble for. So this is an organisation that's pretending to be government-esque. They also pretend that they can win you a grant, which is not true. By all means, check out this website and go and have a look. All the information they provide on successful grant recipients have been pulled from government pages to display what they've got, the grants. They'll ask you to pay them to give you information on grants. And they will tell you when you sign up that you'll be eligible for this grant or this grant. And they are wrong. They are wrong. This is just a money grab. Every now and over the years, I used to ring them just for fun. Just for fun, yeah. And then I'd tell them who I was. And every now and then I'd throw a certain issue to the ACCC. One time I looked them up on the Australian Business Register, and I think that there were about probably 9 business names registered under this one company. Okay, so they would shut one down and open up another one. Has anyone seen these guys before? They're still around. Okay, stay away from them. Great, that's my community service role done. Okay, great. That's me. I've actually finished pretty early. I thought there might be quite a few questions, so I've left some time for that. I do have a mobile phone number, but I never answer it openly because I'm normally doing stuff like this. But there's our landline, and I've got some cards here as well, and that's just our generic email address. But I do have proper cards I'll give to special people in the room. Okay, so there's that. The next part, if anyone wants to hang around, is going to be based on the Singleton grant specifically. But right now, I'm open to any questions that anyone has or any discussion you'd like to have on your experience with grants that you've arm wrestled with. Has anyone found I've been through this talk and I've missed something? Does anyone feel brave enough to go and apply for a grant now? Bearing in mind, bearing in mind, because of the reasons I mentioned around the state and federal government environment currently, there's not a lot about. Okay, so just bear that in mind. So you're always going to be watching the horizon. Not even I look at it every day because there's other things to do. If you're running a business or an org, you don't have time for this. If you do have a board, it's good to set one person's task just to be watching this stuff. In the business, same. If you can afford to make sure you get the results filtered to your inbox, to your admin, that's much simpler to do it that way, instead of someone scanning through all the time. Getting those lists from your local member is a good idea as well, so someone else is looking for you. Yeah. Is anyone here for a specific reason? Like outside the Singleton Community Fund, is anyone sort of saying, where can I go for a grant? Or has anyone seen a grant that they're thinking about applying for? Yeah. What have you seen? Okay, so 2 ideas for you. Now, I used to work for the EPA, and back before 2010, where they were just stick compliance. You've broken the rules, here's a fine, I'm taking you to court. Now they've got, the EPA's got a whole bunch of programs. It's all about reducing waste, increasing circular economy and recycling, okay? One of those programs is called Bin Trim. Now, will a small business with 2 or 3 people get to apply for that? Probably not. But if you were in sort of like a plaza situation, or at least a group of shops banded together, you might be able to actually get funding for a shared recycle bin, for example, to do it that way, to reduce waste as a collective. If it's around education, that normally comes through the Environmental Trust. So if you're educating, and it's not just for not-for-profits, community environmental trust, it's also for businesses in some cases, and it normally looks after the skills and education side. So there's 2 spots I would look straight away. Then don't forget about any private grants that you can find. Any of the banks that aren't held by shareholders, so Bendigo Bank, Beyond Bank, any of those kind of grants, look for those. And then anywhere else that you can hope to find them. There is quite a large circular economy org called Australian Circular Economy. So there's that. And I'm hoping that they actually, what I think the thing is, it's a bang for buck situation. So they'll look over the small business to try and get to the SMEs so they can get more results, that type of thing. But if you've got a sustainable mindset, don't lose it. Don't get disheartened. But certainly if you've got more businesses around you that are willing to participate, that gives you more weight. Does that make sense? Yeah, no worries. Anyone else? That was a good one. That actually applies to the Singleton grant because there's a minimum amount and a maximum amount. I've never seen the minimum amount before, so that's fairly new to me. Yeah, so it does make it tricky, and it's not just that. The word counts you have to keep track of. Sometimes it's a character count, and that's even harder. So it includes things like commas and dots and full stops and that kind of thing as well, only spaces. So there's that. So what I normally do if I'm helping someone is that I'll have either a Word document or a Google Doc, which has a word count on the run, and you can check that stuff. As opposed to which question do you tick, because you might cover more than one, I would go for the one that you've got which has the most weight to it, and maybe a secondary one as well, because there might be some side effects to what you do that applies to both. If you can't find anything inside that set, because the ones for Singleton Council are based around their pillars inside that community strategy. So that's actually quite important. If you can't find anything, maybe it's not the grant for you. But I'm happy to sit down with you one-on-one to go through it, if that helps.